The best way to create a world-class business sounds simple. Build a brand, use effective marketing strategies, and hire a systems-driven team. But doing that, it's far from easy. And then doing it alone, it feels nearly impossible. I have taken the biggest leaps in my business when I've invested in masterminds. A mastermind is a group of people who are like-minded and we're committed to growing, sharing, and holding each other accountable. These groups are what I've had to enable me, and they help me create the business I own today. I want you to have the opportunity to experience the transformative power of a mastermind in your own business. So I'm opening the doors to my mastermind for 7-figure entrepreneurs. If you want to commit to building your future successes alongside a group of incredibly talented entrepreneurs, you can apply now at jasminestar.com/mastermind. I can't wait to see how your business scales. So he stood on a stage and in front of everybody, looked at all of us and said, "This is how you get ahead of 99% of business owners." Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Jasmine Star Show, where we are going to be talking about how to get in front of, ahead of 99% of business owners. How's that for a hook? I've been trying to work on my YouTube hooks. Like, how are we doing? You know, people are like, you got a long way to go, girl. That's right, but you want to know what? I am better today than I was yesterday. On that note, let's go back to this thing that I heard. Now, earlier in my career, I was making a transition away from doing branding and marketing consulting for specifically photography-related businesses. Started my career as a photographer, then I started creating content for other businesses that were related to the photography industry. And then once I decided, hey, I'm gonna go back and I'm just gonna focus on my business, these businesses said, can you come in and teach our teams what you had been doing? So then I repeated back what I thought I heard. Are you saying you want me to tell your team what to do, and then I come back online for a meeting just to check in to see if they're doing what we said we're going to do? To which they replied, yeah. And I was like, I'll take that job. Let's take that job. And so that had been the form of 3 revenue streams in my business at the time. Taking photography clients, I had an online store for photography educational resources for photographers, and then I was consulting photography-related businesses on how they might be able to create their marketing and branding to attract photographers. I started expanding who I was speaking to, specifically to business owners and small business owners, people outside of the creative space. Now, I was approached by an event to go and speak at their event. Now, this is me just getting outside of my industry. This would not happen today. But because I didn't have a lot of experience in what events look like for digital marketing, I just assumed they would look a lot like the events that we had in the photography world. Boy, was I wrong. I was asked to speak at an event, and they wanted me to go in and talk about social media marketing. What I didn't know was that this event would be very much structured to be like that quintessential, it has bad blood, a lot of what people would say snake oil salesmen in the digital world, like buy now and you'll get everything you want. I had no idea that this world existed. So my husband and I, we go to the event, I'm there with the videographer, and they asked me to get to the event an hour early just to ensure that I was mic'd and everything was set to go. So I walk into this hotel ballroom and there's no windows. It is freezing cold. They have, you know, those like 2-foot black stages. It's 2 feet high. And the length of it is probably 12 feet and the width of it is probably 6 feet. So it's like just a tiny little stand. Like I could essentially build this black stage with tools and resources from Home Depot. Yes, that was the stage for this event. They had a bunch of chairs that were there, and the event was attracting a lot of business hopefuls. Like, we're going to teach you how to build a business. And so by and large, the audience, they're dressed casually. It was a Saturday. Like, this is like the jeans and t-shirt kind of folks. And everybody who was speaking at the event or hosting the event, they were dressed in 3-piece suits. I'm talking about they even had the handkerchief in the pocket. Now, I grew up where my dad would buy like 3 suits, which includes a tie and a shirt and a handkerchief. Like, we would go to East LA, and then there in like the fashion district, you would be able to like bundle these suits. And so he would get like 3 suits for like $99. But the handkerchiefs in the pocket, it came stuck in the pocket. Like, my dad would say, I'm like, oh, this looks so tacky. And he would cut it out. Well, at this event, these brothers were wearing 3-piece suits with a real hanky in the pocket. It was such a mismatch, right? Because it's not like we were at this hotel, like the Ritz-Carlton or the Four Seasons. We were at like a right off the freeway hotel in a ballroom where people were dressed casually. They had like a pop-up table in the front for registration with the typical lanyards, and they were on the stage. And I'll never forget. So I get there about an hour early, and they have programming, like 2 speakers before me, each doing 30 minutes. And whenever they would announce the speaker, there would be like the person on AV, and then they would, like play the most quintessential conference song, like, Jump Around by House of Pain or 8 Mile by Eminem. And so the speakers would be walking down the aisle. Now, the room is long. And so you're walking down the middle of the aisle, like almost like it's like Price is Right or like a Soul Train. And so the jeans and t-shirt folks are sitting at the ends, and then the guest speakers are going up and like they're pumping like, well, like they're doing like the, well, I'm up in the club type thing in their shiny shoes and like big heads. And then they jump up on that 2-foot stage, and then they give the speech. And at the end of each 30-minute session, they would say, oh, well, there's a group of us at the back of the room where you'll find us with clipboards. Have your credit cards ready. We're going to... And I was like looking around, and I'm like, what is going on? What did I just agree to speak at? Now, mind you, I did not get paid to speak at this event. At that time in my career, I'm moving away from events in an industry where I had established my name and brand into a space and industry where nobody knew who I was. So what do you got to do? You got to start at the bottom. So I agreed to speak at this event. I wasn't getting paid, and all of a sudden I see so much sales pressure. Let me tell you, anytime you're in a very cold room, they intentionally keep it cold so that you don't fall asleep and you're actually not thinking all that smartly. And they'll say, go to the back of the room, drop your credit cards. And so there's like a crew of people in the back where they have clipboards. They run your credit cards because they want to sell you higher and higher and higher. They were making consecutively higher pitches the hour that I was there. And I'm thinking, oh girl, what are you going to do right now? Like, what are you going to do right now? So then they announced Jasmine Star is going to speak about social media marketing. And I look at that center aisle and I was like, know who you is. My dad always said, know who you is and know who you isn't. And I was like, there's no way I am walking down that middle aisle and high-fiving people. There's just no way. So like the event producer was, I know, you look at people are going to hear this and they're going to be like, who does she think she is? Like if you're going to hear this and if you want to have an event, you probably are not going to want to book me, to which I say, okay, because I know what I cannot do. I cannot walk down a middle of an aisle where I'm in a room where I'm very unfamiliar. I'm not even sure of what is being sold, and I'm not even sure of the sales mechanisms that are happening. So I was like, listen, nobody's going to protect your brand. You better walk in integrity to what you can control. And so the producer put me in the back of the room and they're like, we're going to cue your song, which by and large, I'll give you one guess for what song you think they played for the only female speaker at this event. What do we think it is? Could be Girl on Fire by Alicia Keys, or it could be Roar by Katy Perry. It seems like when you go to a digital marketing event and there's a female speaker, Girl on Fire, Roar, it's Roar. No other songs they're going to do. Those are the girl mantras. Ladies and gentlemen, for everybody who's working in NV, please ask me for a list of songs that are not gender specific and maybe, just maybe, can pull from like different areas of genres. Okay, so instead of sitting in the back of the room, waiting in the back of the room for me to be called up and high five and do like a little 2-bit jingle or whatever, toe tapping down the aisle type thing, I was placed in the back. Then I went all the way to the right side. I walked all the way down. So this is like the warm up. Like I'm, Jasmine Star is located, blah, 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 blah. And I'm down the right side of the aisle, walking to about the second row. They're like, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from the back of the room, Jasmine Star. I come up from row 2 on the right side, get up on the stage, say, thank you so much for having me. And I jump right into it. And again, what am I doing? I'm trying to do things my own way, because what the gentleman on the stage had said, given a presentation before, was that he stood on a stage and he said, this, like capital THIS, is how you get ahead of 99% of business owners. And so his suggestions, how to get ahead. Here's a couple examples. Decimate your competition. He literally said, when you wake up in the morning, you want to think about taking them down. You want to put all your energy into showing them who's the new kid on the block. You want them to stop ever doubting what it is you can do. So how do you do that? You decimate your competition. You wake up and you eat your competition for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, so everything I've done and like how I approach things is like I focus on the quality of the experience that I am providing for a consumer. I am deeply dedicated to creating a customer success journey. And so to do that, I'm empowering my customer success team to always try their best to make it right, to do right by our customer, our user, or our client. And the way that I've gotten ahead has been through transformation. Now, if you notice the difference, he was saying decimate your competition, which in my mind puts all of the time and energy on other people and things I cannot control. And so in my mind, how I was able at that point to get ahead of competition has simply been, well, there are things that I can control. I can control the experience that a customer has. I can control what the customer journey looks like, and I can focus on the transformation. Another thing he had said was an acronym. You got to be ABC, always be closing. Always be closing. Every time. He's like, I want you to be, when you're in the grocery market, think to yourself like, how am I going to close this? When you're talking, you're taking your kids to soccer. When you're at the PTA, I want you to be ABC, always be closing. Who can I be closing? And I thought to myself, ABC, always be closing? How many friends you got, bro? Like, who wants to be around the guy who's got, another opportunity to make money in less time, double your income, let's go, bro. I thought, can I make another acronym? So I decided I'm going to take what he's saying on how to get ahead. I'm going to make it my own. Instead of ABC, always be closing, I decided ABC, always be creating. Creating value, creating time, creating wins for other people. Maybe you don't like always be creating. How about ABC, always be consistent. Show up, control what you can show up. You don't like creating or consistent. How about ABC, always be converting. Into what? Conversation. Into what? A conversion. ABC, yeah, we could talk about closing, sure. But when you talk about the difference between ABC, always be closing versus ABC, always be converting, when somebody converts, they're making up their own mind. They get to say what they want. Instead of closing is, I'm going to answer every single question. Oh, and I have a script. So whatever 87 excuses you have for me, I'm going to know what to say right over. I'm going to out-talk you so that you feel like, whoa, okay, every fear has been demolished. Yeah, but by what? By force talking? By brute force? Listen, I am not saying that doesn't work. In fact, I want to be very clear here. His approach worked because there was a bunch of people who got up, walked to the back of the room, and handed over their credit cards to the mafia with the clipboards. It works. It works. I just don't think it works for me. And so when we talk about how to get ahead of 99% of your competition, how about we decide that there's different ways that work for every single person, and there's not just one single way. And so I'm sure you can tell I didn't follow his advice. And then against his advice, I decided to create my own path. And then I ABC remained consistent, and I ABC remained creating. And on the back of the content I was creating and teaching other people, it made me realize that there's not a right or wrong. But for the sake of this conversation, how about we talk about my journey of getting ahead of 99% of business owners who are at the same point I was. Now, to be clear, I'm not ahead of 99% of business owners, period. Not at all. But, if I'm ahead of 99% of the people who are swimming in a pool at any given time, I'm ahead of the people who are in the pool. I'm not ahead of the 99% of all swimmers, which includes professional athletes, right? So in the terms of this conversation, how do you get ahead of 99% of the people who, all things considered, are roughly around where you are in your business? So this episode, I'm just going to be sharing about 3 or 4 things that help me get ahead. And again, just my experience, just my advice. If you want to do the complete opposite, I totally applaud you. All I want you to do is win. And if winning requires you to do something that is totally opposite of what I'm saying, I'll clap you up. I absolutely love that. So here are the 4 things that I did to get ahead of 99% of business owners at the same place I was 12 years ago. Number 1, don't expect a 10-point checklist. So what do I mean by this? Is as I consecutively continued to expand, as I up-leveled and as I scaled, I was understanding that the version of who I was could no longer be the version that I was in that moment. Essentially, what got me to that point will require something else of me to get to the next level. And so early in my career, I started realizing that I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I wanted to be around other people who thought bigger and did different things. And so my first exposure into this world of personal development and business development, and specifically digital marketing, was by joining a mastermind. Now, to be clear, I am not saying that the mastermind is the only way of doing it. I am just saying that that is what happened for me. And I literally found a mastermind by reading a blog post that I had come after a Google search. I don't remember the exact Google search, like the exact phrasing of it, but it was late one night and I was asking, how can I grow my business online? And so I went through a litany of articles. I ended up on somebody's blog. I don't remember whose blog it was, but they did an interview of a gentleman who was talking about scaling with a group of people. And I was like, oh, that's what I need. And the word that he used was mastermind. I had never heard of that word before. And so I joined a live class and I watched him pitch around this thing called a mastermind. So I signed up for it. I had no idea what I was doing. And so whenever I go into a new situation, I follow the same thing I've always done since childhood. Now, I'm sure there's probably some licensed therapist who's going to hear what I'm going to have to say and say, we need to dissect this. We're going to get Freudian or Jungian. We're going to go back to my childhood to unravel it. Listen, it's just who I am. I have done this in childhood. Whenever I'm in a new situation, I immediately clam up and all I do is watch. I have a twin sister, and when we were in college, we decided to backpack through Europe for 4 or 5 weeks. And my sister is the complete counter opposite, like the yin and yang, the sun and the moon, like a positive and a negative force. That is my sister. We look very much alike, but we are so different. Whereas in social situations or new things, my sister jumps in like she was freaking born there. So it's just like, she doesn't speak French and she doesn't speak Italian, but whenever we would be backpacking, it would be arrivederci, and she would act and she would say things like with just enough accent for somebody to think like, maybe she's been studying French. So they would, extend beyond the preliminary, like, bonjour. I can't even pretend to say the things that she would say because she would just memorize a few catchphrases or a few salutations in French, and then people would think that maybe she knew French and they would just go blah, 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 and speak back to her, and she's just like, parlez-vous anglais? I'm like, what are you doing? Like, we would be in these crowded train stations, and my sister would just jump in. And if you've never been to Italian train stations, now we're not talking about the major cities like Rome and Florence. We're talking about train stations that put you out in the middle of towns that you can't even pronounce. And people were clamoring over each other, trying to get tickets on a train. And immediately what I did is threw my backpack on the floor and I just looked and I watched. And I'm like, okay, who's going in what line and why? And I'm trying to count who's going where are they going after this? Where do they get the ticket? I'm trying to map the whole thing out. My sister, big backpack and all, just jumps in. Scusi. Parla Italiano. I'm like, what are you doing? She jumps right in. Those experiences have stayed with me from childhood into adulthood. So I get into this mastermind and I am not saying, parlez-vous anglais? I am literally, I don't speak any language. I'm just going to shut myself and I'm just going to be real quiet. What I was really doing, what I've always done, is simply analyze. Analyzing what's going on in the situation. And so I realized that in every situation, there's always a pattern. You might have to wait longer before the pattern reveals itself, but there's always a pattern. I was in the very first mastermind meeting in person. We're in San Francisco, and all of these people seem to be following a flow or speaking the same language, or this is not their first rodeo. And all I'm thinking is just follow the flow, follow the pattern. It's going to reveal itself. Just analyze. And so what you want to do is repeat the pattern with other people until you understand the pattern, and then you could break the pattern. I am not saying this is right. I am just saying that this is what I've always done. If I understood where to buy the ticket, then I should just repeat buying the ticket, standing in line and doing it that way until I understood ways that I can get around it. In the mastermind, my first reaction is clam up, follow the pattern, analyze. Go with the pattern until you can break the pattern. So adhere to the system without as many changes as possible until you feel confident to do that. So when I was going into the mastermind, how I was able to really maximize my opportunity, how was I using this idea of clamming up, this idea of watching, how could I use it to my advantage? Well, this was what I started noticing. In the mastermind, somebody asks a question or they share a challenge. This was generally the nature of it. And then people asked clarifying questions. Like, do I understand this the right way? Have you considered this? I just want to make sure that all of these things have been done before we start ideating or offering feedback. And once that happens, then people offer insights. They're not saying, hey, this is what you should do. They'll say, have you considered this? What about making it look this way? Or this happened to me once, and while it's a little bit different, I think in this situation, you could draw a parallel. Now, the person who asked the question, right? So I have a challenge where I'm asking a question. They first clarify the questions. Then people ask, have you considered this? Have you done this? And they're just asking what they've done up until that point. It's at that point that the person who asked the question shuts their mouth, and then that's it. Nothing else is needed. This person is not in front of the mastermind asking, okay, but if I do that, what are the 10 steps to do that? In a mastermind, the pattern I saw was present a problem, an opportunity, or a challenge. Get clarity around it. People simply ask questions or give ideas, and then the person who asked their question shuts their mouth and gets to work. They go and they create a 10-point checklist for themselves. They do not expect it from the mastermind host or anybody else in the mastermind. All they got was a bunch of questions and new perspectives of the same scenario. Then they go and create an action item for themselves. So I started learning how winners behave. You guys, this is like 2016. And for the first time in my career, I'm actually understanding, how do winners behave? What do? Well, they ask a question, they get feedback, they create their plan, they do the work, they amend the plan. That's how winners win. That's it. And I once heard a conversation where they said, if somebody asks a question, you should be able, if you're good, to answer it in less than 30 seconds. And the answer in and of itself should be so simple that 99% of people won't do it. So if you want to know how winners win and how they behave, they ask a question, they get feedback, they create their plan, they do the work, they amend the plan. Because, like, I don't want to spill the tea, but the plan that you start with hardly ever works the first time. You're always amending the plan. So winners don't need answers. Winners need insights. When I understood that I could win simply by getting insights and making a plan, I started getting ahead of my competition. Second way that I was really understanding how to leverage the things that I was learning, how to get ahead of the competition, was learning from others and other fields, other industries. I'm telling you, this is like the best kept secret that was, one, probably never a secret. I just never knew about it. And now I want to share it with everybody. So early in my career, I went to an event called Alt Summit. I can't even explain why or what called me there. I just thought, I need to be in Salt Lake City in February in the dead of cold, where everything in the city is white because it's covered in snow and it's like negative degrees. Not like negative degrees, it is negative degrees. Why I needed to go at that time, I don't know. All I just knew was I need to go out and meet different people. Now, this event attracted a wide array of people. Now, this was very much early in like my blogging days. And so I was going there, and a large part of the attendees were fashion bloggers. They were bloggers who were into sewing, or not printmaking, but like when they come up with their designs, like you come up with a design and then you follow the design. I don't know the exact words of it. So you can just see, like, I'm at this event, and a lot of the content and a lot of the networking and mixers and things that they're talking about doesn't have to do with my business. But I just wanted to see the way that different industries and different businesses are run, because I could get that information and start distilling it. How could I use it in my industry? Or how could I do what they're doing in my own way? It was simply seeing a different industry and the way it's done to break your frame of what's currently happening and what's currently possible for yours. A few years later, went to an event called Woo and Wellness. Now, I wouldn't necessarily consider myself to be like very woo. I'm probably moderately woo. I'm very much into wellness. And so I went to this one-day event, and we did things that were so far out of my comfort zone. Okay, like we had a 2-hour silent tea ceremony in the middle of a vegetable garden, and we're sitting on the dirt. It's completely silent, and they have like this big like flower circle. They give this like a mandala, and they have this color. There's a design of these flowers, and then you sit there, and they do a very traditional tea ceremony, and everybody's silent, and you're just sitting in this vegetable garden, and you drink 9 cups of tea. And I was like, okay, I've never done this. Being alone with my thoughts for 2 hours was crazy and powerful, and life-changing. We did sound baths. Have you ever done a sound bath? Like you basically take a nap and like the music vibrates at a certain frequency that's supposed to be when you're at your calmest state. And they had laid out these like knit blankets. Like, I don't know, in Spanish we call them a serape. I don't know. I don't know what else to call them in English. I'm just like, this is a knit blanket. Anyway, they had these serapes laid on the floor, and then they had like these bean-like pillows, and then you just lay there, and like they have these instruments, and they just play, and there's like gongs, and you're like, this is so weird. And then you like kind of like meditate and fall asleep. It was crazy. We also had a session, you guys, all of this is in one day, if you can believe it or not. We also had this session where we're standing in like, not like a dirt field, but like kind of, there's not a lot of plants, right? There's trees, but it's mostly just dirt. And so then they have like this DJ who sets up this like pop-up speaker area. And so then we had this guy who comes in from LA, and he has these big flowy, almost like hippie MC Hammer pants, and he has these dreads, and he takes off his shirt. He's built like his 6-pack has a 12-pack, you know? And so then he's just like, we're gonna fall into our bodies. He's like, we're gonna let every preconceived notion go. We're just gonna be ourselves. We're gonna find ourselves in movement. And the DJ's playing music, and I am telling you, the guy is like thrusting his hips and moving his shoulders and like arms above you, and they're swinging, and you're just swaying side to side, and then you're like concave, and then you're convex, and your hips are rolling from side to side, and you feel stupid. You feel dumb. And then all of a sudden you get to a point where you're doing it 15 or 20 minutes where you're like, well, doing it halfway, you're missing the whole point. And so then I just decided, listen, everybody else here is doing the same stupid thing. And so I'm just going to concave and convex, and I'm going to be moving. And the minute I stopped caring, I just started having fun. I let my body do whatever my body wanted to do. I went to an event of mixed business owners, 8 and 9 figure business owners. And the goal was to mix and mingle with people who are outside of what it is you do. And I happened to be sitting at a table with a gentleman who ran a CRM, but specifically for dentists. And he had explained to me what this whole idea was that, sure, there's a lot of CRMs out there. I mean, you have like HubSpot, or you have Dipsado, or you have a lot, like Honeybook. There's a bunch of CRMs. And what he was saying was that dentists wanted a CRM that was very specific to their industry. And essentially, the dentist just wanted to be a dentist. And what the dentist really wanted was a business in a box. Just a solution that would get from like front end to back end and fulfillment, and let the dentist be the dentist. It was essentially a done for you system. And my eyes were opened to the power of creating a service that's not unique, but that's highly specific to an industry. So what did I learn? I learned that winners can quickly connect disparate dots to find a solution in their own business. What I saw with these bloggers, what I saw with these pattern makers, what I saw with people who were building birdhouses, what I saw by people who were creating a sound bath, hosting woo and wellness events that's traditionally an underserved market, and they had hundreds of people there paying hundreds of dollars for a one-day event to sit in a vegetable garden. Like, there's just so many opportunities to see a dentist have a CRM with so many other huge, amazing, powerful CRMs out there, that you actually don't need to be the best in the world. You actually just need to be best for a very specific group of people. So winners are able to connect disparate dots and create a solution. The third thing that I learned when it comes to getting ahead of my competition was not to discredit others. And I think this is like a very, very important one. So I remember how I mentioned Alt Summit. There was one night I didn't want to go out. I'm very much an introvert, but I said I'm committed to being at Alt Summit for 3 days. I'm going to be expanding. I'm going to be going to dinners. So we went to dinner, and then at the end, like after dinner, there was like a little bit of networking and mixers. So I went to that, and I found myself just like up against a wall. I didn't go with anybody. I knew I was by myself. And then there was another person standing next to me who was holding up the wall alongside me. And as we got into conversations, I figured out that he creates custom checkers and custom chessboards. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And what he didn't say, I'm going to later on share, was when I was talking to him, the thing I always tell myself at any event I go to, I'm here to learn one thing. I'm here to learn one thing. And I didn't know that the one thing that I was supposed to learn that year from alt was going to be from a guy who was standing next to me on a wall, not really participating. And as I asked him questions about his business, he had an Etsy store, and then he was really there to learn how does he get his Etsy store and then build like a Shopify front end for it so that he can do fulfillment and Etsy not take a piece of whatever they were getting from him, is that he knew how to listen to what customers want. And then he knew how to listen of what they would pay a premium for. And so he was teaching me the questions he was asking me. He was asking of people. He was teaching me how he was creating his listings. And he had like standard listings. And the difference between a standard listing and a premium listing was more than a 10x difference. And I'm like, who in the world is paying that for customized checkers? Oh, he knew. I was at a mastermind. And there was a woman there, and she was so sweet. You know, she was like so nice, definitely quiet. And she was not in any way, shape, or form the type of person that would get a lot of attention. In fact, if I was being kind of honest, she's the kind of person that you might be familiar with at face. But if somebody were to say, like, oh, hey, do you remember her from these events? There was a large chance the first and second mastermind that I went to in this group of 35, I probably would have said no. And I'm embarrassed of that. Here's why. One of the things that I so desperately want that doesn't come natural to me is to be okay in my own skin and march to the beat of my own drum. And her marching to the beat of her own drum really just looked like she just didn't give a rip what anybody said. She was just there to play her own game. And if people spoke to her, that was great. And if nobody spoke to her, that was great. She didn't feel at all pressured to go to the group dinners. She did not feel at all pressured to do the happy hours, where I felt like, okay, well, I'm here and I got to do these things because of why? I was telling myself a story. She was the kind of person who just didn't tell herself stories. And let me give you a brief description of how, for the first couple sessions in this mastermind, I was just watching from a distance. So in the mastermind, we would break up and we would have small group hot seats. It'd be anywhere from like 3 to 4 people. And so here we are, about a group of 35 or 40, and then we broke into much smaller groups. And so there's about 10 groups of 3 or 4. And we happened to be sitting in a group, and there was another person sitting next to us, and they're going through their hot seat. And then she reaches into her canvas bag, and she brings out a head of lettuce. Not in a bag, just from her tote, where her notebook is, and her laptop, she just brings out a head of lettuce. Okay, so the third person's talking about their hot seat, and then she brings out this head of lettuce, and I'm like, okay, well, pay attention to the person who's talking. But I'm like, I'm fascinated. What do we need with the head of lettuce right now? She doesn't do anything. She doesn't peel back the head of lettuce. She just takes a bite of the lettuce like it's an apple. And I am trying my hardest to like look at this person and nod intently about like what this hot seat, and I can't. I keep on peeling my eyes. Like, she's eating a head of lettuce like it's a fruit. And she was just there, munching away. We would have guest speakers come into the mastermind, and then she would bring out knitting needles and yarn. And while this person is talking about ad strategy, Google Analytics, whatever the case may be, she was knitting. Now here's the thing, you guys. Nothing is wrong with eating a head of lettuce straight from a canvas bag. Nothing is wrong is knitting while you're learning about Google Analytics. Nothing. I, as a grown adult, wish that I had the chutzpah to be like, you want to know what? I'm not sure I care about this, or maybe knitting helps me think about it. I wish I had that in me. And I started looking at her, and I started becoming so fascinated by her own determination, by her own grit, and doing things her own way. Now, our masterminds at the time, there would be like 4-day events, and every day we started at 8, but around like 8:55, she would disappear. And then she would come back during our 10:15 break. This was a regular thing, and she'd be gone for a pretty considerable amount of time. Well, this is what I learned, is that she was doing the powerful, yet simple, yet hard thing of consistency. So I didn't know, but she had an $8 million business, and she traveled around the world with her husband and children. And why she was disappearing every day at 8:55 was because at 9 a.m., she would be giving a live webinar every day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. She was running continuous ads for a live class. And whenever somebody said, oh, why aren't you on Evergreen? Why aren't you in demand? Or a lot of people were saying, you know, you're so good at converting people because people just fall in love with you. Like, why don't you just pretend it's live? There are softwares that you can make it look like it's live. And she probably, if she could have, would have stabbed them with her knitting needles and said, I am not a liar. But she didn't. He just kept on doing her dang thing. And her finding the ability for her to be okay with who she was, to take what she wanted to take, to do things on her own terms, was allowing her maybe not to have $100 million business, but her $8 million business was such a lifestyle business for her. She had very few employees. She built a compound. I don't remember the state. It might have been Idaho or Iowa, something along those lines, where she had literally bought acres and acres and built a compound for her and her husband's family. And she was doing this entirely on her own. This whole episode is talking about how to get ahead of 99% of your competitors. And then the caveat was, listen, I am just sharing with you what I have done and what I have known. And number one was to never expect a 10-point checklist. And number two was to learn from others. And then number three, where we're talking about right now, is don't discredit others. And at a 2-day mastermind retreat, there was like a bunch of new people. And I met an older guy, and he was wanting to build his YouTube channel. And this was not a mastermind that you would go to all year. It was just more of like a mastermind event where you pay a high ticket, you get to be in the room with other founders. Now, he was very much on the quiet side, and he's just like, his only focus was like, listen, I'm only here because I want to learn how to build a YouTube channel, and it's all foreign to me. And to the best of my memory, what he sold were hand-carved bird collars. Now, here's the thing. I'm born and raised in Los Angeles. I am a city girl through and through. I didn't even know that there were tools to call birds, much less there's like a whole like subculture of people and bird calling, like tools that are expensive. And he was a hand-carved, apparently, best of the best bird calling tools. I'm sure people are going to send me a DM with like what the actual name is. Now, when we were in this mastermind, you would have opportunities to ask questions, and his questions were always around YouTube. He came in with a singular focus. I'm here to learn one thing. And so he would ask anybody who was speaking along that topic, or he would ask a follow-up question and be like, well, how might you make this work on YouTube? That was his whole focus. He was completely unapologetic. He went in laser focus. And if we were not talking about YouTube or video strategy, he was just really quiet. So I sat next to him at lunch, and I just kind of wanted to know him. I guess maybe I'm attracted to the people who are beguiling to me, people who maybe like identify or embody the things that I have, which have a tendency to be like, I'm laser focused and then really quiet if it just doesn't really pertain to the thing that I am there to focus on. And I found out when I was there that he had sold an e-commerce business for $50 million. And so he didn't need to start another business. But he was really passionate about making these bird collars. He dove headfirst into making them, and he had started a really successful business for his bird collars. Here's the thing. Was he making millions in the business? No, but he didn't need to. He had already done the thing he set out to do. He already sold his $50 million business that was bootstrapped. And so now what he's doing is he's building a business because number one, he loves to build a business. And number two, he likes to be challenged. He wanted to build a business that was so different from how he had done it in the past. So here is what I learned and then applied to help me get ahead of 99% of the competition. I learned that you can never judge a book or an entrepreneur by their cover. Not all business gangsters drive Ferraris. You know, like the two spectrums of these people, you know, these Etsy store creators who sell custom goods for checkers and chess pieces and are literally living their best life. The type of person who will bring out a head of lettuce and just munch on it, or knit when these big, amazing business minds are there, when she understands that I'm happy with my $8 million business and I'm doing it my own way and I live in a compound and I get to travel and be with my kids and my husband and I'm happy and I go live every day and this is me just doing my business. To the gentleman who bootstrapped and sold his business for over $50 million and then gets into bird calling and he wants to grow bird calling on YouTube because he loves the game. And so I'm collecting all of these stories and saying, what was it about them? I'm not going to discredit or judge anybody else. Anytime I'm in a room with an entrepreneur, I am there and can and should learn something. It is in learning these small things that are empowering me to apply it to myself and whoever my perceived competition is. Now, I know that we're talking about going to events, and I know that we're talking about going to masterminds, and I will not say that a mastermind is an end-all be-all. What I will say was a mastermind was the first thing that really opened my eyes to what the world looked like and put me in rooms that I would otherwise never have access to. It is why I'm so passionate about it. In fact, we are opening our registration for my own mastermind. This mastermind is for 7-figure entrepreneurs. We are going to be focused highly on building brands and marketing on social, but more than anything, the whole tenet is going to be how we can focus our 7-figure businesses and get them to 8. Because what I've noticed when it comes to scaling is anytime you can muscle your way, you can muscle your business to around 1.2 million, and you can do that on your own, maybe like 1 or 2 VAs. But once you start getting to like that $2 to $7 million mark, scaling comes in 2 ways, and both need to be in existence. Number 1, you're going to be scaling by way of your systems. How locked in and tight are the systems that you've created, so much so that people can join your team, see the system, follow the system, and get identical or very good results. And then the second way that you're going to be scaling to 8 figures is by scaling your team, attracting top talent, because you're going to start realizing that you can get your business up to like 1 or 2 million, and you can have like a manager, and then the managers then report to you, but then there's just too many people who are reporting to you, so you still stay in the business and not on the business. So how do you add that layer in between your leaders and yourself? Like, where are you hiring your division directors? Where are you hiring your C-suite? What does your org chart look like? And so I'm so excited to be creating a mastermind that is going to empower everybody to do just that. Scale to 8 figures by way of systems and by way of people. You can join the mastermind. You can check out the application, jasminestar.com/mastermind. Okay, we're going to get into the 4 things that I have done to get ahead in my business. So number 1 was don't expect a 10-point checklist. Number 2 was to learn from others in different fields. Number 3 is don't discredit others. And then number 4 is don't discredit yourself. I know. I think it's easy to compare yourself, and the hard thing that I've seen in myself and other business owners, the hard thing is to actually look back and appreciate how far you've come. A lot of times what I think of, and I did a lot of interviews with 8-figure business owners, and imposter syndrome affects 8-figure business owners too. Imposter syndrome oftentimes affects 6-figure business owners in, can I make this work? Who am I to do this? People are going to find out I'm a hack. I don't know enough. 7-figure entrepreneurs, from the research and data that I have been digging into, this is what I'm doing so much in my time in life, is I'm just digging deep and finding patterns with business owners, is that when you're at the 7 figures, imposter syndrome doesn't show up so much in the way of like, who am I to do this? It's more along the lines of, I have reached a level of success, but I'm now doubtful, can I do it again? I am doubtful that I can become the leader I need to in order for me to scale. I'm worried about stepping out of the business because what if the business was so dependent on me? Like, did I do enough foundational and structure work? But a unique thing, which is the most ironic, is with 8-figure founders, imposter syndrome has a tendency to show up in a form of, but what I do is not that special, right? Well, yeah, it's great. I have an 8-figure business, but other people have done this. Yeah, I have an 8-figure business, but like, isn't it the norm? Like, isn't this like what we know? Like, when you're in the game long enough, like, this is what you should be doing. And oftentimes, it's not who am I to do this? It's just, it's not that special. And when the narrative becomes, it's just not that special, 8-figure business owners have a hard time getting driven back to the purpose of what it is they do. Finding themselves asking questions more along the lines of, okay, but what is this all for? Like, we have this, like, what is next? Is things ever enough? And so, when we talk about imposter syndrome in the 3 phases, 6-figure, 7-figure, 8-figure, I mean, these are by and large wide generalities, but we should also very much know they affect everybody all the time. If you're building a business, imposter syndrome will come up. So oftentimes, one of the things that I think about is, how do we give ourselves credit? How do we appreciate the ways that we've been able to create value? And when I talk about not discrediting yourself to get ahead of your competition, I struggled with this deeply because I would be getting into rooms that, I'm just going to be very honest, I don't believe that some people are more important than others. I really don't. I don't believe that some people are special than others. I don't. But I do believe that when you walk into a room based on street credibility or what they've done or the business accolades or how big their business is or how many businesses they've sold, I don't think they're more special or different or unique, but I do think that street credibility and the proof is in the pudding that you've done things that very few people have ever done. So for that regard, amazing. And so when I found myself in rooms where I really distinctly felt like I am the smallest fish, and I'm not even in a big pond, I'm in the wrong pond, I started equating what my value was. Do I have something of value to give? Which is the wrong headspace to be in. And so in order for me to actually say, I'm not going to discredit myself in this room, what I decided to say is I can create value in this room, even if it's not in relation to things that they have done personally. I can create value in other ways than the reason why we're here in this room. Okay, so let's dive into a couple examples. I was at a cohort, an executive cohort, and they were all talking about this one thing, and I was, of course, the only other woman, and so we were talking about parenting and being a CEO, and they were talking about the work-life balance between being a dad and a CEO, and they asked me, what are some of the things that you have done? And I shared a little bit of my insight, and then two of the guys that were in the group, they ended up sending me messages, and they said, hey, thank you so much for that, but I just didn't see it that way. It's oh, they found that valuable even if we weren't talking about the merits of things that I have done professionally. Another thing is I try to create value in rooms that I'm in, even if I'm completely on the outs, is I know how to give recommendations. I know, it sounds so silly, right? If somebody wants a recommendation, I'm gonna give a book recommendation, an accountant recommendation, a recruiter, a recruiter I've worked with very well, what does it actually look like? I can give a recommendation. One thing that I've done to create value in others, remember, we're sitting here and saying not to discredit yourself, but immediately we go to, these people are better, they have more accolades, whatever the case may be. So in order for me to say, hey, I know that maybe while the totem pole for success, I might be towards the bottom, it doesn't mean that I can't get value. And one of the things that I've been pretty good at getting value is I know I'm a connector. I know how to connect people. And so I'll be in rooms where I can think to myself, this person really needs to talk to this person in this niche industry. And so I'll go up to them after, hey, I listened to what you said. There's this person, I describe it. I said, would it be okay if I asked them if it was okay with them to make an introduction? 10 out of 10 times, they're yeah, sure, that would be amazing. And so I'll go to this other person and say, hey, I met this great person at this event. I think you really need to stay connected to them. I think there could be a value add. And so then once I get approval to make the introduction from both parties, I'll make that introduction and then, yeah, I'm done with it. But you want to know what? Anything that was good, and I'm not even talking about just a business deal, even just the facilitation of the conversation itself becomes so powerful that they remember I created value for them without any expectation. The last example that I'll give, I'm actually keeping these very general and nebulous because these are all very special, intimate. I want to protect the people's privacy who I'm having these conversations with. And so I was part of an event and there was a gentleman that I really respected his business. I just love what he does. He started the business with his mom, and we had a guest speaker come in, and he had asked the guest speaker for a strategy question. And the guest speaker, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know if the guest speaker either understood the question or understood what was being sold, because I'm listening to the advice that the guest speaker gave, and let me be very clear, the advice itself was freaking amazing, but the advice in relation to his business structure, I was I don't know if that's right. I mean, I'm not gonna say it's wrong, but do you understand? And then he had tried clarifying with the guest speaker, well, no, because this is how it works in this industry, and I know that industry. And so we were on Zoom, and I sent him a private message on Zoom during it. I was just hey, this guy, the guest speaker, is brilliant. I am not saying that what he's saying is wrong, but I think that what is happening is there's a disconnect between, and then I explained what I thought it was, and he said, yes, exactly. And I said, I don't think that having us go into that nuance for an industry he's not familiar with would be worth his time or even the group's time to be spending on it. I said, I would love to set up a 20-minute call because number one, I understand B2C, I understand your industry, and I actually think we can ideate around a lot of good marketing ideas for what it is you do. I was this is what I eat, breathe, and drink every single day. And I emailed him right when we were on Zoom. I emailed his assistant. I said, hey, can I have your contact information? Give me his assistant. I looped in my assistant. I could just set up a 20-minute call for us. And literally the next day, I get a $50 Amazon gift card. And he said, I'm so excited to chat with you about these ideas. Let me tell you, for all intents and purposes, I am so outweighted in that room. But I created value by simply saying, I see your industry, I know what it is you do, I think we could just chat and have ideas. Ideate. So my question to you is, how do you not discredit yourself? By finding your own way to create value. And value isn't always a very specific strategy about a very specific thing to be in a very specific room. I always end these conversations with having a clear call to action. And the clear call to action is usually, I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you. But before I get there, there is a reminder. Applications are open for the 7-figure mastermind. This is for people who want to scale to 8 figures. I cannot wait to share who our guest speakers are. We're having 2 live events. These are going to be two-day events. We are meeting every single month on Zoom. We have our own Slack channel. We have asynchronous communication. We have guest speakers. It's going to be the cat's meow. Okay. I want to know where you're doing. I want to know where you're at. I love being creepy. When people tag me in stories when they're at the gym or where they're listening, like, you don't get it. It brings me so much joy. I think that social media, I know it has its ups, it has its downs. Some people hate it, some people love it. I get all of it. But every so often being able to connect with people by like the clothes, the pile of clothes that they're folding, or them being on this glorious vacation, and while they're on vacation, they have a little time to brainstorm and they'll listen to the podcast, or if they're out walking the dog. Y'all, I care about you and I love seeing your life, and I'm just basically a creeper. Thank you for listening to the Jasmine Star Show. I cannot wait to connect with you online soon.